So I want to talk to you about a very interesting topic in social services as a social worker from my personal experience about the differences of social working in the inner cities compared to the outer cities and in the countryside. And I'm going to talk to you about what I've noticed from the different demographics and how they correlate to the different types of cases. Can I break it down simpler? What's the difference between social working in the cities compared to the countryside? Well, I've got the inner city, like I said, the outer cities or the outer counties, and then the countryside, the far out counties. And we were talking about this at work because not all social workers have worked in all three. Maybe there is another category. However, I'm fortunate enough to have worked in different parts of the country. And so I've just recently gotten a job as an advanced social worker in safeguarding in like a 4-hour drive type of distance from my house. And I've worked in various parts of London, South London, southern counties, and now again in a very far out county. And this is a message to parents and social workers. It's a lot of learning. It's just my experience though. However, what I'm going to talk to you about, the outcomes of each of the groups, for me, are all equally disturbing. So I've got it on my screen because I can't remember it all. But in the cities, I noticed that there was a lot of exploitation, county lines activity, knife crime, robberies. What about the drugs? Well, when it came to the drugs, minorities tend to use cannabis, in my experience. They tend to look down on alcohol and Class A, but they do find it really acceptable to use cannabis. When we're talking about cannabis, we're talking about an acceptable use specifically even in with the adults and the children, because it's now culturally acceptable. It's a culturally acceptable drug generally in the minority groups. Most of the homes I've gone to, there are working in youth justice and social work. They have been single parent homes, whereas mum tends to be at home. And because cannabis is more acceptable culturally, it tends to be used freely without any kind of conscience about it. There's also obviously gang culture, but this is a very technical issue that is going to be addressed in another video about why gang culture is connected to knife crime and county lines and so forth. We also saw a lot more female and male sexual exploitation. So yes, in order to be initiated, some girls will be sexually abused, raped, and lined up, trained to be a sex puppet for the gang leaders or to be in certain groups. And it is also perpetrated by a lot of females as well. And I think this is probably to psychologically break them into the group. And then there's a level of solidarity there. But you also see it with boys as well. So boys will be sexually exploited by their elders or peers, caught on video, used to force them to do things, or they'll share the video out there. But for me, I think that there's a lot of sexual abuse in the history of these boys, why they do that to each other. There is a minority of white boys committing these same offences. It's mostly minorities in the cities doing this, in my experience. I also noticed that life generally revolves around the use of cannabis. You also see a lot of low self-esteem masked by bravado, but you'll find that in almost any group as well. Finally, there's a lot of missing episodes. County lines means that they're gone for 2-3 days, 2-3 weeks. Moving on to the outer areas, we see lots of cannabis use, a lot of single parent homes. Then we start to see more Class A addiction of the parents as well. Both parents, whether they are together or separate. There's now a lot more domestic violence, alcohol abuse, alcohol addiction. You're going to get a lot more boyfriends in the home and allegations of sexual assault. There is some county lines activity, but I very rarely saw it. I also noticed that professionals talk differently about the black boys in compared to the white boys. So the black boys tend to be spoken about with a little bit more, like there was more contempt a little bit. That's an issue I'm going to try to address at the end if I've got enough time. I think it's more subconscious, to be honest. I don't think it's like conscious bias. I think it's probably unconscious. They tend to use more affectionate words with white boys, in my experience. And there is then, as a result of the DV and the alcohol and the Class A, there is a lot more neglect of young children as well. I think in my experience, parents tend to justify why their children aren't going to school and justify their negative behaviour. That's in my experience. However, working in the countryside, it's a little bit more narrow in the bandwidth. So it's all of the above, but it's rare. Mostly you're going to find more Class A addiction, alcohol addiction, extreme neglect, a lot of domestic violence. Neglect is a massive issue. Yeah. So as I said before, when it comes to race and racism, I don't think people intend to be that way necessarily. I'm talking about professionals. I've generally found them to be quite nice and open-minded about things. But it's an observation where their language is different, but they wouldn't know because they don't work in the cities in the same way. So there's no hatred towards professionals in this. But those are my observations. And I've had this discussion with another very experienced social worker who said the exact same thing. Again, I've been fortunate enough to work in the different demographics, and I did that for a reason. So someone did ask me, and I'm going to reply on TikTok, why have I chosen to work out in the countryside? Because I want to experience what it means to work out there, because I want a breadth of experience, and they are completely different worlds. And I would encourage you all to try it. I mean, if you want to know my agent, I'll let you know. But I would encourage you all to try it because they're desperate for social workers. I mean, you'll get a job. The outskirts of the UK, the edges outside of the cities are desperate for social workers. So there's not going to be a shortage of work, but it's really interesting work because you learn a lot about yourself and them. But what we do need to do is stop attributing certain crimes with the colour of people's skin. We have to be careful about that. Now, there are correlations, but we have to be careful about how we portray that. So we must stop, first of all, I'm only going to speak about knife crime, stop attributing knife crime to the colour of someone's skin. It's actually culture. But that's an intelligent discussion that the media is not trying to have. And I'm imploring you all to urge the media and share this video to let them know that the colour of someone's skin is not an indicator of the type of crimes that they commit. And if we keep bringing up the colour of someone's skin, black boys committing knife crime, we also need to refer to the other parts of the country where there are no black boys, but knife crime is still a problem. Again, it was a big problem in Scotland. They managed to deal with the issue. We haven't transposed that, all those resources and ideas down into the London areas. We haven't done that. But we are happy to continue the narrative that black boys and knife crime are synonymous. It's in pockets of the UK and pockets of communities that happens. And it's not about skin colour because white boys do it too. In fact, so do Asians. It's big. But rather, this is the byproduct of culture and deprivation. This is what happens. Crime happens where there is poverty and deprivation. And where I work, there is a lot of deprivation. There isn't much going on down here. And this is the natural byproduct. People turn to alcohol and drugs, and it creates a lot of neglect. But the difference being is that cannabis is in the cities and Class A is rife out here. I didn't come across much DV in the cities, but the further out we go, we find a lot of DV and a lot of neglect, because I think the difference between cannabis and Class A is that the impact on the families is seen in severe neglect. I could talk about this all day. This is to trigger wider discussion. Just to let you know, this is not my bedroom. This is Airbnb. Just saying, because that is not my picture. You get me? I want to put that on my wall. But I appreciate where I am. It's actually a nice place. But yeah, this is just an observation. And please have a wider discussion. Please share this video because there's so much to learn.